Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 28 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. Thanks for coming back. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like, and comment in the comment section. Do all those things. That helps out with the algorithms. You made it this far. I appreciate it. Two little easy things you can do that would really, really help me out, and I appreciate it. And this is the Las Vegas Raiders, my 28th team. And I think that this is a team that's sort of a victim of circumstance more than anything else. When I ran through the schedule, that's how I determined my worst to first, is I run through the entire NFL schedule, I predict every game, and then I check the standings afterwards. And this is where they landed. And it's because they got to play the Chiefs twice. They got to play the Chargers twice. They even got the Denver Broncos, who now with Sean Payton, you got to anticipate they're going to be a lot better than the fifth worst team in the NFL with Sean Payton, a lot more better coaching, a lot better scheming, a little bit of a better roster with some of the additions that they made. The Raiders are just in a rough spot where they could reasonably go 0-6 in the division and be immediately behind the eight ball. They also got to play the AFC East, which between their own division and the AFC East, that could be 9 losses. That's 9 losses right there. It's just not a conducive schedule for a lot of success, especially with how weak some of their position groups are on the defensive side of the ball, and in particular with their pass coverage, even with the additions of Duke Shelley and the drafting of Tyree Wilson. We'll get to that down the line. They also now, all of a sudden, as of this recording, it is the 10th of June. There's rumors that Jimmy Garoppolo might not even play. What does that look like? What does that look like if Jimmy Garoppolo isn't on the team because he can't pass the physical? And then Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell's your quarterback? It's just a wild scenario. And personally, I think that Josh McDaniels is not a good head coach. I think that he's got a really good defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham, who's sort of in a position now where he's continuously having to make chicken salad out of chicken, whatever. And then Mike Lombardi, the position coaches. The defensive coaching staff is actually really strong, and we'll get to that. I don't like it. I don't like what the Raiders are putting out. I think that they were a little bit of a better team last year. At least at the quarterback position, even with Jimmy Garoppolo. I do like Derek Carr more than Garoppolo in the grand scheme of things. And I think, I don't know. I think that underperformance is not going to be that great. But let's get to the video. Let's get into it. Let's start with the coaching staff. So we're going to kick it off with the coaching staff. It's the 29th coaching staff for me. To me, it's just a bunch of coordinators, guys who should be coordinators at best. And we'll start with the head coach, Josh McDaniels. He had his run in Denver. That didn't go great. And now his run with the Raiders isn't going all that great either. There seems to be a lot of instability, we'll call it, in this organization in general, and he seems to be front and center for that. The running Derek Carr out of town was insane. Bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo because he's familiar with him is an interesting decision. I think that does bring some familiarity with the system. Hopefully Garoppolo can get back into it if he's even on the team. And he's working sort of hand-in-hand with Mike Lombardi as an offensive coordinator. So it's just, I don't know. There's nothing that Josh McDaniels has really done to show that he is a formidable head coach. To me, he's another guy like Todd Bowles and Dennis Allen, where it's like they're high-level, high-quality coordinators. But when it comes to controlling the entire team and setting the tone for an entire team, it's just not happening. It's just not working. And I think that them finishing this low could be the final straw for McDaniels, even though They seem to have invested a lot in him. I think if you have 2 really terrible years in a row, they don't care how good the division is. They're going to want to get in a guy who can be a real solid face for this organization. I think if they finish this low, they're a big-time trade candidate to get up to number 1. New coach, new quarterback. Even if McDaniel stays, if they finish this low, having Garoppolo after Derek Carr, they were sort of out of range. Clearly didn't love Will Levis, but if they can move up, get Caleb Williams or Drake May, I think that's something that Josh McDaniels would really like. I think trying to find a quarterback for him has always sort of been the struggle in his story as a head coach. And I think the opposite is true for the defensive coordinator for this team, Patrick Graham, who really came onto the scene with his performances for the New York Giants under the Joe Judge regime. And he did a lot of good things out that defense for that Giants team under Joe Judge with Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator. That defense was really the thing that kept the Giants in any and all games for the most part. They were prone to giving up a lot of big plays, and I think that this defense will be sort of prone to do the same just because they don't have the talent on the back end. It doesn't seem, at least in pass coverage. So that's going to be something that they're constantly going to have to be improving on, developing certain guys, improving on certain play. And I think a lot of that also comes from the ability to get a pass rush, which they addressed with Tyree Wilson coming in, who can sort of play in and out. I think Patrick Graham will have a lot of fun using someone like Tyree Wilson, who I think early in the season you'll see him taking up a lot of passing down opportunities, just rush him at the passer. And then I think as the season goes on, we'll start to see him more on those early downs. And I think Patrick Graham's going to have a real opportunity to truly mold a very raw but high ceiling talent like a Tyree Wilson. So I think there's a lot of excitement, at least for Patrick Graham, certainly getting a guy like Tyree Wilson in the door, because Patrick Graham, at the end of the day, he knows how to scheme up guys. He knows how to make more with less. He showed it with the Giants. Didn't really have an opportunity to really show it all last year. But I think that was just, you spent all that money on Chandler Jones. It didn't really work out. Now they've lost sort of linebackers in their pass coverage. They're sort of rebuilding this entire team sort of slowly behind the scenes, and it's just they're a little too good to rebuild fully. They have a lot of really good players, and I think that this coaching staff they got the guys on paper for the most part, but they're going to really have to figure out how to scheme these guys into having high levels of success. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, there might be a little bit of a harder time than the defensive side of the ball. I just think that the offensive side of the ball is going to have undoubtedly has more actual pure player-for-player talent than the defense does. So I think Patrick Graham's going to have a much harder road this season than the offense will. I think if the offense struggles, it's going to be solely based upon scheme. I think if the defense struggles, it'll probably be more just talent-based struggles. We'll start with the quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo, he gets a 70, coming off another injury. How much, and he's might not even be coming off of it, which is a story all on its own. Again, as of this recording, he's still on the team. So his contract has not been voided by new part owner Tom Brady. But it's Garoppolo. They got Brian Hoyer, who's really the backup quarterback. He's been a backup quarterback for so long. He's really, I think, a strong candidate to be a guy who just is a player/coach more than any other player in NFL history has been, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. And then they drafted Aiden O'Connell. I guess is just a guy that they can maybe mold slowly throughout the year, and maybe if they suck, they can play him towards the end and see what they got there, and then maybe they feel they don't need to trade up. I think if you're finishing in this area and a team like Arizona's in last, they're not really looking for a quarterback. I think that's what you go for. But overall, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's the safe quarterback for the system and someone McDaniels is comfortable with. So I don't expect anything truly dynamic coming out of this offense, even with the weapons that they have, and we'll get to those in a minute. But I just, it's just, there's nothing to be excited about with Jimmy Garoppolo. It seemed like such a lateral move at best, going from Carr to Garoppolo. But we'll see. Garoppolo is capable of having a lot of success because he is such an efficient game-managing quarterback that maybe the lack of mistakes that he'll make, assuming he plays, the lack of mistakes that he'll make will allow the defense to play a little bit looser, give them more opportunities, maybe create more leeway for mistakes to be made by the lack of talent on the defense. It might provide an opportunity for this defense to play with long fields, having a quarterback like him. Not these short fields where a defense that doesn't even really have all that talent now has to protect just 40 yards of field without giving up a touchdown. Now, if they have 60, 70 yards to work with on most drives, I think that could make things a lot easier, and it could lead to more success for the Raiders. And I think Garoppolo and Brian Hoyer in particular, having those two quarterbacks and their familiarity with McDaniels and that Patriot system, I think is very telling to what this offense is probably going to look like this year, which is extremely uninspiring, but maybe not completely terrible. And we're going to check out their receiving backs here. And Amir Abdullah is actually a really good receiving back, a really good third down back. And he really has an opportunity, I think, to be the James White of this offense. With Josh McDaniels, one thing about the quote Patriot offense is that they really know how to use running backs and smaller receivers in particular really well. They know how to scheme these guys up properly. They know how to put them into positions to succeed. So I think that when you have a guy like Josh Jacobs, he's a 65, he's not a terrible receiving back by any means. I just think that you got guys like Brandon Bolden, who's a little bit better on those third down situations, and then Amir Abdullah, who I think is actually a pretty high level guy in that scenario, with drawing that 81. It's really his only role, again, kind of like James White, where you're not going to turn around and hand him the ball off or have him run between the tackles, but you can run him out into the flat. You can split him out into the slot in motion and have him run some routes. You can run some very effective screen passes. And I think that he's got a real opportunity to really have quite an impressive season, especially working with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who is not afraid to check down to these guys and they get the ball in these guys' hands and these athletes' hands and let them make plays. So I think there's a real opportunity brewing for Amir Abdullah in the way that this offense operates overall. I do think Josh Jacobs is, even though he's, to me, the third best receiving back, of course not by far, but I think that if anyone's going to be taking snaps away from Jacobs, it's mostly going to come from Amir Abdullah in these third down situations, sort of freeing Jacobs up to be more of a running threat where he really is at his best, which is turn around, hand the ball off, more so than throwing him the football. Even though he's had some really good receiving games, if you had to tell me we're throwing a pass to one running back, it's for sure Amir Abdullah every single time. And we're moving on to the receivers and the tight ends, and you can see it right there, Davante Adams, the best receiver that we've covered so far. He's a 91, one of the best, if not arguably the best receiver in the NFL, even now. Still had a good year last year. He's really a true number one receiver, and I think that with another year in McDaniels' system, his ability to play inside and outside is really going to be an advantage for him. And then you got a guy who they just brought in, Jacoby Myers, who's sort of the same type of thing, you inside-outside type of a guy, so you can sort of mix and match him and Davante Adams and where you're going to line them up throughout the season. And I think that's going to make for some frustrating times, so to speak, for defensive coordinators. And then Hunter Renfrow, who's just a straight-up slot guy, one of the better slot guys in the NFL, comes out with a 76. They did trade Darren Waller to my New York Giants. Thank you for that, for the 100th pick in the draft. But they did use some high draft capital getting Michael Mayer, who to me was the best tight end in the draft. He comes out as an 82 in the receiving game. I love Michael Mayer. I think that he was an absolute steal. He should have been the first tight end off the board by my estimation. I understand Dalton Kincaid, but to me, Michael Mayer was a first-round pick. He was a top 25 pick in the draft, and they got a great steal out of this. For the long term, I think it's going to be better for their offense. He's going to be able to come in. He's going to be able to block, especially in on first and second down. So you got yourself a true 3-down tight end who, even though you signed Austin Hooper and you signed O.J. Howard, I think Michael Mayer is the best of both of those guys. So, you will see the 2 tight end sets with him and Austin Hooper or Mayer and O.J. Howard. But I think mostly we're going to see Michael Mayer. And I think as the season goes on, that's going to be more true. And for good reason. He's already probably a top 15 tight end in the NFL in terms of talent-wise. It's just, unfortunately the draft value of these guys is not very it's not very high in the NFL. And when you look at some of the depth that they have, we'll start with the tight ends we were just talking about. The Austin Hooper does get a 75, so he's a good player in the receiving game. O.J. Howard gets a 65. They have Jesper Horsted, who is sort of like he'd be like sort of like my hybrid player. Him and Jacob Johnson, I think, will be competing for snaps. The receivers, DeAndre Carter, Trey Tucker, the rookie they drafted. Him and Keelan Cole, I think, are sort of interchangeable. And Philip Dorsett, I'm not sure he makes the team. He keeps finding his ways onto rosters somehow, but I don't know that he makes the team. I think that we'll see them probably just keep the 6 receivers. And then Horsted and Jacob Johnson, I think, will be competing for a roster spot. Jacob Johnson, the fullback that you saw in the previous receiving backs portion. I think they'll be competing for a spot on the roster. But not a lot of depth at the receiver position. But I think the way McDaniel sort of likes to run his offense with a lot of 2 tight end sets, I think there's going to be real opportunities for this offense to actually be quite efficient in the passing game even still. So now we're going to run down their offensive line in terms of pass blocking. And they got Colton Miller, one of the better left tackles in football. He grades out as an 85 in pass blocking. Jermaine Illuminor gets a 76. So I think in terms of pass blocking, they got really good tackles for that. The interior, on the other hand, they got Dylan Parham, who's playing guard. I don't. Okay. Andre James, and then they got Alex Bars. It's just not a good interior. To me, I'd probably throw in a different combination of players if you're looking to focus on the passing game, even in the running game, because I think there's one guy that they have sitting that's sort of going to be the 6th offensive lineman on the roster, and you can see him here. Thayer Munford gets a 71 in pass blocking. I think he'd be a much better option at the guard position, but it seems like they see him as a tackle. So he's going to be sort of Jermaine Luminar's backup. Then you got Justin Herron, who's going to be the left tackle backup. Natane Moody, Greg Van Roten seem to be the interior guys that they're going with. And then Brandon Parker, who I actually don't mind. He just doesn't grade out well in terms of pass blocking. So that could be really his downfall, especially because most teams aren't keeping 10 offensive linemen. They're keeping like 8 or 9 usually. But I think Brandon Parker is sort of the odd man out here with everyone involved because, Moody can play center and guard. So I think that's where he's going to make the team. Van Roten, I think, is just straight up guard. Heron's a straight up tackle. I think Munford should be playing guard in the NFL rather than tackle, but so I think he's got a little bit more versatility than Parker as well. But overall, the depth is actually quite good. I actually don't mind the depth there. It's crazy. You sort of look at, this is basically a starting offensive line on its own, from left guard to right tackle, and it doesn't look that bad for passing game. It doesn't look terrible. Now we're going to look at the rushing threats, and Josh Jacobs comes out with a 92 after a phenomenal year last year. He did get franchise tagged. Be interesting to see when he gets a long-term deal, if he does. But he is a superior talent running the football. It sort of gets lost because the Raiders, as an offense in general, haven't been very exciting. But I think Josh Jacobs last year really showed what he could do. And in an offense that is running back friendly, like the McDaniels Patriot offense, Amir Abdullah's in there. Zamir White, I think, will get more opportunities this year as well. But it really is, in terms on first and second down, it really is Josh Jacobs' ball. I wouldn't anticipate seeing Amir Abdullah and Zamir White get a lot of carries. And if they do, that's probably not a good sign. for Josh Jacobs in general, but overall the running back game, the way they can turn around, hand the ball off, in terms of the talent of who they're handing the ball to, I think is actually really, really strong. Now the same could it be said for the run blocking? I mean, still the two tackles still stand out to me as solid. You get a lot better from Dylan Parham in the running game, at least so far in his NFL career. And then at Andre James, Alex Bars. Alex Bars right now is projected to be the starter again. Like I said, for me it would be Thayer Munford. It wouldn't even appall me if it was Netane Moody. But to me, it'd be Thayer Munford. We look at the grades. Munford doesn't grade out nearly as well in the running game as he does in the passing game, but he's still, in both facets, a better player than Alex Bars to me. And I think this offensive line would take actually a step up in both running and the passing game with Thayer Munford playing that right guard position. But, Netane Moody, I think you can slide him to guard as well. And I think that if Munford or Moody is starting instead of Alex Bars, I would be a little bit more enthused about the way that this offensive line would operate. Then you got Justin Herron, who, as good of a pass blocker as he is, he's horrific in the run game. Greg Van Roten is kind of just, he's like the 8th, 9th offensive lineman on your roster. And I think Brandon Parker, again, not grading out that high in terms of the run. He might be, I think last year I would have graded him a lot better based on his performances prior, but he seems to be sort of on the downward trend. Maybe it's a scheme issue, but I think of everyone, he seems to be the one that's the odd one out. Like I said, during the pass blocking aspect of it, he seems to be the odd man out here. So it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't make it too deep into August on this roster. So now we're going to go with the overall positional summaries. And in the passing game, you got good weapons. You got good weapon groups. The wide receiver and the tight end groups are actually quite strong. One of the stronger groups that we have. Of course, boosted by the likes of, the combination of Michael Mayer and Austin Hooper. Boosted by, Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, of course. Because when you get to the depth, especially at the receiver room, it's not that great. The pass blocking on the offensive line, the depth and the starters, like I pointed out, they're almost identical. So I think that if you can put Thayer Munford in that starting role, you boost that pass blocking up a bit, and then that overall it boosts up the total grade of the offense. It might bump you up a couple spots in terms of the rankings against the rest of the league. The running game, though, you're not going to get much blocking out of those wide receivers at all. The tight ends, not really going to get anything other than really out of Michael Mayer, I think. He might be, that's why I think he's going to get 3 downs. I really like Michael Mayer as a blocker as well. But the overall offensive line, I don't know that you're going to get much on the interior. So I'd beware when they play against teams like Kansas City, like Denver, who have strong interior rushers, like a Zach Allen and Chris Jones, of course, is in there as well. And then you go and they play a team like the Jets, who's got Quinnen Williams, the Giants, who got Dexter Lawrence, and where those guys are going to be lining up, considering where the strengths and weaknesses are on this offensive line. They're going to pick on Alex Bars. They're going to pick on Andre James. They're going to pick on Dylan Parham and sort of let their edge rushers work one-on-ones out there and then bring all their stuff up the middle. So it's going to be interesting how Josh McDaniels is going to counter that in his play calling and in his scheme. So just the offensive summary, they are the 23rd offense in the league for me, 19th against the pass, 21st in terms of the rush. And I think, and like I said, a lot of this is sort of brought down a bit by their offensive line grades. I think if you bring Thayer Munford in, you could probably get this passing offense closer to like maybe 16 or 17 and get the rushing offense into the top 20, which would then raise the overall offensive grade maybe into the top 20 as well. It's just those types of decisions, maybe they're scheme decisions. Maybe it's just, coach being more comfortable with certain guys and just not getting positive game performances out of them. But when you lack that stability on the offensive line, the way that they seem to still have, and just not addressing it in the draft when there were opportunities for them to do so, I question that. I question that wisdom a bit, but I think that it also opens the door up for them that if they kind of stink, there's some really good offensive linemen coming up. So I mean, there's hope sort of there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, at least for the offensive line. But I think again, if a couple things go right, this offense could probably perform like a top 20 offense, for sure. Moving on to the pass rush, and I think that on these passing downs, these third and mediums, third and longs, this is what this front four is going to look like. It's going to be Max Crosby and Chandler Jones on the edges. That's where all your money is. And then on the interior, you're going to get Bilal Nichols, and you're going to get the rookie Tyree Wilson, who's going to sort of play maybe like a 3-4 eye technique on these passing downs. Let him work against some guards, use his size and his length against them, and help collapse those pockets a bit and sort of make quarterbacks get out, not allow them to step up, and then right into the hands of Crosby and Chandler Jones. I like Bilal Nichols. They don't really have like a nose tackle for these passing downs. I don't really anticipate they have much of a nose tackle at all. They sort of they have a lot of these like 3-4 defensive ends and like 3 techs, but there's no like at the edge group. We'll talk about the depth at the edge group first. It's just Kuntz, who's really only good for rushing the passer, and then Jordan Willis is sort of like a whatever. He's sort of like, you put him in, you don't feel that bad putting him in on like first or second down every now and then. And then on the interior, they do have the rookie Byron Young, who I guess is their nose tackle along with Neil Farrell. Byron Young, he will get some opportunities across all 3 downs as the season goes on. Jerry Tillery is just, never really worked out. Matthew Butler just didn't really do anything in his rookie year. Adam Butler, I don't think they're related. And Neil Farrell sort of give you the same. I think Farrell just has a little bit more appeal because he's more of a nose tackle. But, I mean, he hasn't impressed in really any shape or form either for this defensive line. But it was a rough year really for everyone except Max Crosby anyway. So I think a lot of these guys have a lot to prove. I'll say that this upcoming season after a horrendous year last year. And speaking of horrendous, this might be the worst position group in the league that we cover. It's the Raiders linebackers in pass coverage against the pass. Divine Diablo and Amari Burney are the 2 best ones, and I don't like them at all. I really don't. I think against the run, these linebackers are actually fine. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think they're in a position where they need somebody here to really step up and break out, because you get these 2 guys here are just horrific. And it doesn't get any better with Robert Spillane, Darian Butler, and Luke Masterson. You're going to get, I think you got 3 good linebackers on first and second down with Spillane, Diablo, and Burney, but you need one of those 3 guys to really step up this year on passing downs. A lot of that does come from the team's ability to pass rush. I understand that. Sort of everything sort of comes from the ability to pass rush. Allowing the linebackers to play more instinctively, I understand that. But they also need to step up their game to help cover for the times when the pass rush is not that good. To cover up for when, the coverage on the back end is not that good. You got to play a lot smarter than what they did last year. And I think that you got 3 guys who you're comfortable with on first down. So when you get to second and third, you get a lot more nervous, and that could lead to more smaller packages that involve some larger safeties and defensive backs getting on the field, which wouldn't be out of character necessarily for Patrick Graham to do. You just kind of prefer to not have to do it. So now we're looking at the pass coverage on the back end, and outside of Duke Shelley, who grades very high, love him in pass coverage, there's not a lot. Not a lot going on here at all. Tyler Hall and Nate Hobbs in pass coverage. I mean, okay. They brought in Marcus Epps, who's just not. He's not a flashy player. He's not going to wow you with anything he does. I think he's just solid. I think he can really improve in pass coverage. I just think with everything else going on in this defense, I don't project him to have that great of a year. Neither would Trayvon Merrick, who I think these guys are just much better served protecting against the run. And even with their depth, there's just nothing. They got nothing in terms of depth. They brought in David Long Jr., which I don't get it. I was kind of like to me, when they signed David Long and you sort of see him as being a guy who's a projected starter, I was looking, I was like, it must be just me who thinks that he stinks. And then I went to see how he was graded, and I was like, oh no, it's not just me. It's really not. So I don't get it. I don't know that he lasts that long. I don't think he's an upgrade at all. He might be in pass coverage. To me, he's their worst cornerback. I actually think that Chris Smith II is going to be a real sleeper. There was times during the draft cycle, just back in August and September, Chris Smith was viewed as a potential first-round pick. He just didn't wow anyone in his last year in college. So he kind of fell out of favor with people. It was sort of like him and Brandon Joseph sort of had the same run in college where they didn't wow anyone. They didn't take an extra step, so they kind of just completely fell into the background and completely off of people's boards. But I think Chris Smith, kind of like a lot of these guys in the defensive back group the Raiders have, has a real opportunity on early downs because I think he's quite good against the run. But in general, the safety group, I don't see where the improvements were really made outside of Duke Shelley to this pass defense and the defensive backs. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. And I don't know why they didn't spend. They drafted Ja'Cory Bennett, but you couldn't have done better than Ja'Cory Bennett. There was a lot of guys available in this draft that were actually really good corners. You didn't get one of them? That's wild to me. Wild to me. Now we're looking at the defensive line against the run. I think this is where Tyree Wilson, at least early in the year, will sort of come out. Byron Young, the rookie, will come in. But I think that those two rookies are going to see a lot of playing time on the front four this year. Max Crosby, he's really solid against the run. He's actually quite good. I don't love Bilal Nichols against the run, but that 56, there isn't a whole lot going on with this interior defensive line, guys. They are a squishy middle of the field here on this Raider team in general. Chandler Jones still just average against the run. He's got to bounce back. To get these two low grades for the money he's making, he really needs to bounce back this year. And maybe he can do it. Maybe he can bounce back this year. And if he does, then yeah, this front four, this Raiders defense instantly gets better across the board because when you get two really high-level pass rushers, it really does. It's like the high tide raises all the boats type of a thing. And Chandler Jones, to me, doesn't even need to play like a high-level edge rusher at this point. He just needs to play like a really good number 2 edge guy because now you got Tyree Wilson there who sort of takes some pressure off, and you got Max Crosby who's a true number 1. We look at the edge group against the run. Tyree Wilson, not nearly as good. I think he's going to have some room for improvement, though. I think he's going to get lots of opportunities. Malcolm Kuntz is worthless against the run. And Jordan Willis, like we said earlier, you're sort of okay with putting him on the field every now and then, regardless of the situation. You know kind of what you're going to get out of him at this point in his career. But yeah, Tyree Wilson, I think him and Chandler Jones could see some swapping in and out going on there. And I think he could possibly, depending on how well he plays on those passing downs, how disciplined he plays on those passing downs as an interior guy, he might get some work over a Bilal Nichols on rushing downs, and he might end up being somebody who plays more, at least in his rookie year, as a more interior guy than an edge guy. It'll be interesting to see how they roll him out, especially these days where you see so many defensive coordinators who have gone to like a positionless defense of sorts, especially with the way they run their front fours and when they run their back ends. You look at the interior. This is what I mean, though. They got absolutely nothing. Nothing. This is a huge thing that they're going to need to improve on also. Throughout this year, they're going to need somebody to really step up. And if they don't, then this is going to be a gaping hole in this defense that they're going to need to fill in the draft next year. Good thing for them, there's a lot of good interior defensive linemen coming out, but that does them no good this year, and they need guys to step up now, this year. I'm looking at you, Neil Farrell. I'm looking at Jerry Tillery, who's probably just, at this point he is what he is. But they need somebody to step up. It is a rough watch. Now, as bad as I had the linebackers against the pass, I actually kind of like them against the run. I do like this linebacker group. I like Robert Spillane, and I do like Divine Diablo on first and second down. I like them against the run. I really do. I do. So don't go crazy on me, Raider fans, because I absolutely despise them in pass coverage and even as blitzers. Their depth, with that said, their depth is still horrific. It's still bad. You're not going to get much from this linebacker group except on first down, really, which is okay. Second and longs. If you can create situations where it's a lot of second and longs, then okay. Then you're setting your defense up for some type of success to be able to sort of let those edge rushers pin their ears back and go. But if these linebackers don't show up on first down, it's going to be a long season for this defense. It's going to be a long season. And you look at the run support. Now, this is the starters. I really like Nate Hobbs against the run. Marcus Epps against the run is really good. I think that Trevon Merrick is an above average run defender. Duke Shelley and Tyler Hall, I think, are kind of useless in the run game. But then you get a guy like, as we're going to move forward here, Amik Robertson, who I really like in the run. I really like Chris Smith against the run. The problem is Amik Robertson is basically a nickel guy, and so is Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs, they played him on the outside after a really good rookie year playing in the nickel, and he didn't really respond the same. He had a worse year than his rookie year because he was playing sort of like a fish out of water. He's a nickel slot corner, and so is Amik Robertson. So you sort of run into this weird situation where they're your two best guys against the run in your cornerback group, and it's tough to find a scenario where you get them both on the field. I look at Chris Smith, and I think Chris Smith can come and fill in as a guy in the run game as well. But there's not a lot of depth overall outside of those two guys. And the problem is that you got Marcus Epps, who's really good against the run. You got Trayvon Merrick, who's actually not that bad against the run either. I think Chris Smith is better, but in the passing game, Merrick is a better player than Chris Smith is as of right now. So the likelihood of Chris Smith seeing the field when you're not really losing a whole lot with Trayvon Merrick, I mean, Chris Smith might see the field on first down, but then after that, first down, second and short. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be a real path to get him on the field to use what his skill set is right now. I think the same can be said for Amik Robertson. So you kind of would wish that Amik Robertson was a good outside corner, more so than a nickel corner. So that way you can put him out there, and then you at least got one side of the field covered. You maybe put Nate Hobbs on the other in those running situations, sort of even out the run support that you get from your defensive backs, but it just doesn't seem like it's conducive in the event that you get hit with a play action pass. It could be game over at that point for your back end. If you got that situation, it's going to be matchup hell for you if you're Patrick Graham trying to figure it out. So we're breaking down the positional groups and the passing game. Those linebackers, those safeties, that interior, it is not good. And the interior gets like a bit of a boost. Even I think it's not great. I don't love it. I don't like it. I don't like the interior against the run either. I think everything else, you're in good shape. For the most part, it's a good edge group, good linebackers. The cornerback group is decent. Safety group is good. No depth. They got some decent depth for the edge group against the pass. There's just no depth on this defense, though, in general after that. So that's going to be, I think, a real struggle for this defense in general this year coming up. It's going to be how do you work a rotation at all when you just don't have the players, you don't have the talent. That's why this defense ranks 31st in the league for me. They're the worst pass defense in the league by a wide margin, 66.1, the worst in the league. They're 18th against the run, and that is really brought up by having some good guys on the back end, having some good linebackers, and their edge group being solid enough to set the edges to make those linebackers, put those linebackers in position to make plays. They do need somebody in the interior to really step up. And if they get guys on the interior to step up in the run game, and they get two guys who are average level starters, this could be a top 15, top 12 run defense. But it just doesn't seem like the talent is there for them to be able to pull it off. And it really is affected by how poor the pass defense is. So that rush defense may be just in not great situations most of the season because of how poor they are against the pass. This is what I mean by a tough schedule. I have them going 4-13. And to me, they don't even get a win until they play Minnesota super late in the year. Because, I mean, look at Denver, week 1, in Buffalo. Then you're playing Pittsburgh. Then you're in LA to play the Chargers. Then you're playing Green Bay. You're playing New England. You're at Chicago. You're at Detroit. Then you get the Giants and the Jets, Dolphins, Kansas. This is a nightmare for them. I do have them stealing a game against Denver and LA at home. I do have them beating Minnesota at home, and I have them stealing a game in the Dome in Indianapolis in the Josh McDaniels revenge game, I guess, even though it shouldn't be the Colts' revenge on him for them bailing, whatever. I think that they can keep a couple of these games close, particularly against, I would say, New England, Chicago, and Detroit. I think those are games they could possibly keep close. Just because I'm thinking about who would be matching up with them on the offensive side of the ball. Who's covering Devontae Adams in those 3 games? Do they have the depth across the positions? The Patriots might. I don't know. The Bears and the Lions just don't. The pass rushes on the edges. The Patriots have an okay one. The Bears don't really have one at all. Detroit is sort of okay. So they might be able to steal a win there, but then, Minnesota, Chargers, Denver, there's no guarantee that those are wins. There really isn't. So it's tough to find a win, to find more than 4 wins. I feel like I found 4 wins somewhere. Maybe there's 5 wins in here, but there could be 2 wins in here. Just as likely as there is 5. And that's a scary proposition for a team like the Raiders, who they just don't seem primed for success. So based upon how tough the schedule is, I might be Raiders. If I was a Raiders fan, I might be like, let's just go 0-17 and take Caleb Williams and solve a lot of our problems, potentially. But I don't know. That's just me. I'm petty like that. So just running down a quick summary, 4-13, last in the division, one of the hardest divisions in football, the AFC West. 15th in the conference, 28th in the league, 29th coaching staff, 23rd offense, 19th passing offense, 21st rush offense, 18th run defense, the worst pass defense in the league, good enough or bad enough for the second worst, 31st total defense in the NFL, your 2023 Las Vegas Raiders. Yuck. Yuck. And there it is. My 28 team, the Las Vegas Raiders. I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video. If you made it this far, thank you. If you made it this far, what's an extra little click on the like button, a little subscribe, and a little, I don't know, leave a thumbs up in the comment section as well, or a hey, good video, or a hey, crappy video, whatever. Let's talk. But stay tuned. Still rolling out the videos here, and you can watch the next team here if it's been posted yet. And if it hasn't, then I got the video playlist on the other side of my head, so you can look at the ones that you missed and get a little bit more context as to how I'm viewing these bottom teams, at least so far, in comparison to one another. And I'll see you guys with the next video. Thanks for coming.